I am Gunnar, a 32-year-old architect in Boston with a life that seemed perfect on paper. I had a beautiful fiancée named Sophia, a dream wedding on the horizon, and a close relationship with my widowed mother, Linda. My childhood best friend Jackson returned to town last year, completing what I thought was my perfect circle of loved ones. Last Sunday, at our usual family dinner, I noticed something odd in the way my mother and Jackson interacted. Later that night, a notification on my phone would shatter everything I thought I knew. If you have ever had that moment when your perfect life crumbles in seconds, stick around. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from, and hit that subscribe button if betrayal stories make you appreciate your own relationships more. Growing up with a single mom shaped who I am today. My father passed away when I was 10 years old, leaving just my mother and me to figure out life together. Mom sacrificed everything to give me a good life. She worked 2 jobs for years to pay for my education, postponed her own dreams, and never complained once. She always told me that seeing me succeed was all the reward she needed. Linda, my mother, was only 30 when my father died of a sudden heart attack. She was still young and beautiful, but she devoted herself entirely to raising me. I remember how other kids had moms who dated or remarried, but mine always said, "Gunnar, you are my priority. There will be time for me later." That created a bond between us that went beyond the typical mother and son relationship. We were best friends, confidants, a team against the world. Our house was modest, but always filled with love and laughter. Every achievement in my life, from making the honor roll to getting into architecture school, was celebrated like I had won an Olympic gold medal. Mom was always my biggest supporter, my rock, my moral compass. I trusted her completely and without question. When I graduated with my architecture degree, she cried harder than anyone, whispering how proud my father would have been. Jackson entered my life in elementary school. We were 8 years old when his family moved in down the street. He was the new kid looking lost on his first day, and I offered to share my lunch with him. From that moment on, we were inseparable. We had the same interests in sports video games, and later the same taste in music and movies. He was the brother I never had. When my father died, Jackson was there every step of the way. While other friends felt awkward and kept their distance, he showed up at my house every day, sometimes just sitting silently with me, other times making me laugh despite my grief. His parents became my second family, inviting me for dinner whenever my mom was working late. Throughout high school, we remained best friends despite developing different social circles. He was the star athlete, while I focused on academics, but our bond never wavered. We had an unspoken pact to always have each other's backs. When it was time for college, we made a promise to stay in touch no matter what. Jackson went to California on a sports scholarship while I stayed in Boston for architecture school. For years, we maintained our friendship through phone calls, occasional visits, and online gaming sessions. He was married briefly in his 20s, a whirlwind romance that ended as quickly as it began. When he called me last year to say he was divorced and thinking of moving back to Boston, I was thrilled. At 33, he seemed lost and in need of a fresh start. I immediately offered to help him settle back, and even connecting him with a friend who could offer him a job at a sports marketing firm. His return to Boston felt like completing a circle. My life was going great, and having my oldest friend back made it even better. I introduced him to Sophia, helped him find an apartment just 15 minutes from mine, and made sure he was included in all our social gatherings. He quickly became a regular fixture at our Sunday dinners with my mother. Everything seemed perfect. I met Sophia 3 years ago at the architectural firm where I work. She walked in as a new interior designer, and I was immediately captivated. Not just by her physical beauty, though she was stunning with her deep brown eyes and contagious smile, but by her brilliant mind and artistic vision. Our first project together was a waterfront restaurant renovation, and the way our ideas complemented each other felt magical. For weeks, I found excuses to collaborate with her, bringing her coffee and staying late to review plans that I had already memorized. She later admitted she did the same, purposely scheduling meetings that could have been emails. 6 months into working together, I finally gathered the courage to ask her out properly. Our relationship progressed naturally and effortlessly. Sophia was everything I could have wanted in a partner. She was ambitious but kind, independent yet loving. She challenged me to be a better architect and a better man. When I introduced her to my mother, they hit it off immediately. Mom later told me, "She is the daughter I never had. Do not let her go." 6 months ago, on a trip to Cape Cod, I proposed on the beach at sunset. It was perhaps not the most original proposal, but when Sophia cried happy tears and said yes, I felt like the luckiest man alive. We set the date for this coming June, and our lives became consumed with wedding plans, house hunting, and discussions of our future together. Sophia integrated perfectly into my small family unit. She suggested the tradition of Sunday dinners at my mother's house, saying it would help us maintain our close bond even as we started our own family someday. These gatherings became the highlight of our week, a time when the most important people in my life came together over Mom's famous pot roast or Sophia's experimental desserts. After Jackson returned, he naturally became part of these gatherings too. I was happy seeing my best friend, my fiancée, and my mother all getting along so well. Mom always made sure to set an extra place for him, and Sophia often engaged him in conversations about his sports marketing work. They would all laugh together while I sat back feeling grateful for this perfect family dynamic we had created. Jackson would bring wine or dessert, compliment my mother's cooking enthusiastically, and share stories that kept us entertained for hours. He seemed to be healing from his divorce and building a new life with our support. There were times when he and Sophia would discuss wedding details, while my mother and I prepared coffee, and I remember thinking how lucky I was that everyone got along so well. My mother appeared happier than she had been in years. She started taking more care with her appearance, refreshing her wardrobe, and trying new hairstyles. I was glad to see her focusing on herself after decades of putting me first. She mentioned taking a painting class and joining a book club, activities she had always wanted to pursue but never had time for while raising me. At 57, she was finally living for herself, and I was her biggest cheerleader. The first signs that something was off were subtle, almost imperceptible. A few months after Jackson returned, I noticed my mother checking her phone more frequently during our gatherings. She would smile at texts and sometimes step away to reply. I thought nothing of it initially, assuming it was her new friends from her classes. Then I began noticing exchanges between Mom and Jackson that seemed odd. Inside jokes, I was not part of glances that lasted a beat too long, references to conversations I had not been present for. Once I overheard Jackson mentioning a new Italian restaurant, and my mother replied, "The tiramisu was incredible," was not it. When I asked when they had gone there, Mom quickly said, "Oh, Jackson recommended it to me last week." I went with my painting group. I dismissed my suspicions as paranoia. After all, this was my mother and my best friend. What I was imagining was impossible, inappropriate, unthinkable. When I mentioned these observations to Sophia, she laughed and said, "Your mom and Jackson are friends now. Is that so strange? They both love you and have known each other for years." But then more unusual things started happening. Once Jackson canceled our planned basketball game last minute with a vague excuse. That same evening, my mother was unreachable, claiming later that her phone had died during her book club meeting. Another time I stopped by Jackson's place, unannounced, to drop off concert tickets, and saw my mother's distinctive blue scarf on his couch. He quickly explained that she had left it at Sunday dinner, and he had meant to return it. The incident that truly sparked my suspicion occurred when I found my mother's earring in Jackson's car while we were driving to a baseball game. It was a small gold hoop that I recognized immediately, because I had given her the pair for Christmas. When I held it up, Jackson's face flushed before he composed himself and said, "Oh, your mom needed a ride to her doctor's appointment last week when her car was in the shop." I knew for a fact that her car had not been in the shop. The pieces were starting to form a picture I did not want to see. My suspicions grew stronger as I noticed more inconsistencies. My mother, who had always been transparent with me, began creating elaborate excuses to change plans. She suddenly had emergencies with friends I had never heard of before. Her phone, which used to lie casually on the counter during our visits, was now always in her pocket or face down beside her. Jackson's behavior changed, too. He began asking about my schedule more often, wanting to know when I would be working late or traveling for business. Once inseparable, he now had frequent reasons why he could not meet up. When we did spend time together, he would ask casual questions about my mother, like whether she was seeing anyone or how she was spending her time. One evening, I noticed Mom had changed her social media passwords when I tried to help her with a Facebook issue. She had always shared these with me before joking that she needed my millennial skills to navigate technology. Now suddenly she was protective of her phone and accounts. Jackson, too, had become secretive about his phone, turning it face down whenever I was near. The weight of my suspicions felt crushing. How could I even consider that my mother and best friend might be having an affair? The very thought made me physically ill. I tried to rationalize their behavior in 1,000 different ways. Perhaps they were planning a surprise for my upcoming birthday. Maybe they were discussing some health concern my mother did not want to worry me about. But deep down, a voice kept whispering that something was very wrong. I felt conflicted about investigating further. Was I betraying their trust by suspecting them of betraying mine? Still, I needed to know the truth, even if it would hurt. The confirmation came unexpectedly on a Tuesday evening. I had stopped by my mother's house to help fix her Wi-Fi router. While waiting for the system to restart, I picked up her iPad to check if the connection was working. A notification appeared on the screen, a text from Jackson that read, "Last night was amazing. Cannot wait to see you tomorrow while Gunnar is at his meeting." My hands trembled as I opened the message thread, hoping there would be some innocent explanation. Instead, I found months of exchanges between them, intimate messages, plans to meet in secret, and even photos that confirmed my worst fears. There were pictures of them together in places I had never seen them, in hotel rooms, at restaurants, in neighboring towns, even on a weekend trip to Vermont, that my mother had told me was with her book club ladies. I sat frozen in my mother's living room, the iPad still open in my hands, feeling as though the floor had disappeared beneath me. The two people I trusted most in the world had been lying to my face for months. Every Sunday dinner, every casual conversation, all of it felt tainted now. I must have been sitting there for over an hour when my mother returned from her grocery shopping trip with no groceries. The look on my face told her immediately that I knew. She tried to explain, to justify their actions, but her words sounded like distant noise through the ringing in my ears. "Gunnar, I never meant to hurt you," she said. "It just happened." After all these years of putting my life on hold, I found something for myself. Jackson makes me happy. I left without saying a word, unable to process the magnitude of this betrayal. In the days that followed, I considered confronting Jackson directly, but could not bring myself to hear his excuses. Instead, I hired a private investigator to confirm what I already knew, and perhaps learn the full extent of their deception. The investigator's report arrived 3 days later, with photographic evidence of their meetings at various hotels, timestamps of their encounters, going back nearly 6 months, and records of a joint credit card they had apparently opened together. What had started shortly after Jackson's return to Boston was now a full-blown relationship that they had carefully hidden from me. Upon receiving the report, I suffered a physical and emotional breakdown. I called in sick to work, ignored calls from both of them, and spent days alone in my apartment with the blinds drawn. The weight of this double betrayal felt suffocating. How could my mother, who had raised me to value honesty above all, lie to me so brazenly? How could Jackson, who had been by my side through my father's death and every significant moment since, betray me in this fundamental way? I finally decided to confront them both at our next Sunday dinner. I spent hours rehearsing what I would say, how I would maintain my composure while demanding answers. But that morning I received separate texts from both of them canceling their attendance. Mom claimed a migraine had kept her up all night. Jackson said he had an unexpected work emergency. Their coordinated excuses only confirmed what I now knew with certainty: they were together, crafting lies to continue their deception. Sophia noticed my deteriorating state, but seemed strangely dismissive of the situation. When I finally told her what I had discovered, her reaction shocked me almost as much as the affair itself. "You are overreacting, Gunnar," she said, her tone surprisingly cold. Your mother is a grown woman who has spent her entire adult life taking care of you. Does she not deserve some happiness now? And Jackson, well, they are both single adults who can make their own choices. I could not believe my ears. They lied to me for months, Sophia. They betrayed my trust. How can you not see how wrong this is? Of course, the lying was wrong, she conceded. But perhaps they were afraid of your reaction, which honestly seems a bit extreme. You have been holed up in here for days, ignoring work, ignoring me. We have a wedding to plan, remember. Her lack of empathy created a new wound. The woman I was planning to marry could not understand why I felt so betrayed. Or worse, she understood, but did not care. As the days passed, I withdrew further. I took an extended leave from work, citing a family emergency. I stopped answering calls or texts from my mother Jackson and increasingly from Sophia. I needed space to think, to process, to decide how I would move forward with my life when its foundation had been so thoroughly shaken. Sophia's patience wore thin. You cannot avoid them forever, she insisted one night. We are getting married in 2 months. Your mother is supposed to be part of the ceremony. Jackson is your best man. At some point you need to grow up and deal with this. Her words felt like a slap. Grow up. Was it childish to expect honesty and respect from the people closest to me? Was it immature to feel devastated by such a profound betrayal? For the first time, I began to question not just my relationships with my mother and best friend, but with my fiancée as well. Sophia's intervention came as an unwelcome surprise. One evening, she sat me down in our living room with a determined look on her face. I have made an appointment for you with a therapist, she announced. This has gone on long enough. You are clearly having some kind of breakdown over what is frankly not that big of a deal. I stared at her, stunned by her characterization of the situation. Not a big deal. My mother and best friend have been sleeping together behind my back for months, lying to my face every week at dinner. And you think that is not a big deal. What I think she said carefully is that your reaction is disproportionate. Your mother has a right to happiness, Gunnar. She spent her life raising you alone. Now she has found someone who makes her happy. Is that really so terrible? So what if it is Jackson? They are both adults. Her dismissal of my feelings felt like another betrayal. When I pointed out that it was the deception that hurt the most, she waved away my concern. They probably kept it secret because they knew you would react exactly like this, she said. Look, the wedding is in 8 weeks. You need to get over this before then. I will not have our special day ruined because you cannot accept your mother having a life of her own. It was the ultimatum in her tone that caught me off guard. Get over it. Or what I wondered if this woman who was supposed to become my wife had ever truly understood me at all. 3 days later, Sophia texted asking me to meet her at Giovanni's, an upscale Italian restaurant downtown, saying we needed to talk about our future. When I arrived, I was led to a private dining area in the back, only to find not just Sophia but my mother and Jackson seated at the table as well. My stomach dropped as I realized I had been ambushed. Please sit down, honey, my mother said, her voice gentle as though soothing a child. We all need to talk. I stood frozen, feeling cornered and betrayed yet again. Sophia had set me up without warning. I almost turned to leave, but some part of me wanted answers, wanted them to face me and explain themselves. Jackson spoke first as I reluctantly took a seat. Listen, man, we never meant for this to happen. Your mom and I, we just connected. After my divorce, she was there for me, and things evolved naturally. Naturally, I repeated, my voice hollow. There was nothing natural about lying to my face week after week. We were trying to find the right time to tell you, my mother interjected. But there never seemed to be a good moment. And then as time passed, it became harder. Their excuses sounded rehearsed, as though they had practiced this conversation multiple times. I noticed how they sat close together occasionally, exchanging glances, silently communicating in a way that excluded me. How long, I asked, though I already knew from the investigator's report. They exchanged uncomfortable looks before my mother answered. It started about 3 months after Jackson moved back. She reached for his hand openly now. Gunnar, I know this is difficult for you to accept, but I have been alone for 22 years. Do not I deserve some happiness too? Her attempt to justify their deception by appealing to her sacrifice for me felt manipulative. Of course, she deserved happiness, but did that happiness have to come at the expense of honesty? Did it have to be with my best friend? We want to move forward, Jackson added. As adults, we want you to be part of our lives. As they continued their prepared speeches about adult relationships and moving forward, a new revelation hit me like a truck. I turned to Sophia, who had been suspiciously quiet. You knew, did not you? I asked, the pieces suddenly falling into place. That is why you have been so dismissive. You knew about this before I did. Her hesitation told me everything. I found out about 2 months ago, she finally admitted. Your mother confided in me. I agreed that telling you right before the wedding might not be the best timing. I felt physically sick. For 2 months, the 3 people I trusted most had been conspiring behind my back. Every wedding discussion, every Sunday dinner, every intimate moment with Sophia, all of it had been tainted by this secret they shared. How could you keep this from me? I asked Sophia, ignoring the others now. You were supposed to be on my side. I am on your side, she insisted. That is why I did not tell you. I was protecting you. Protecting me, I laughed bitterly. By lying to me, by conspiring with them, by trying to manage when and how you found out, she countered. I knew you would overreact like this. There it was again, that accusation that my feelings were an overreaction, that my sense of betrayal was somehow inappropriate or excessive. The 3 of them sat looking at me with expressions ranging from pity to frustration, as though I was being unreasonable for feeling hurt by their collective deception. Jackson leaned forward, his expression serious. Look, Gunnar, we need to move past this. Your mom and I are together now. That is just the reality. We can all be adults about this. Nothing has to change between us. Nothing has to change. Everything had already changed. My mother had chosen my best friend as her lover. My fiancé had chosen their secret over her loyalty to me. The 3 people I trusted most in the world had formed an alliance that excluded me, decided what truths I deserved to know, and when I deserved to know them. Gunnar, I know this is a shock, my mother said, reaching across the table for my hand, which I pulled away. But we are still a family. We can work through this. Sophia agrees. Do not. You, dear? Sophia nodded emphatically. That is why I arranged this dinner. We need to clear the air before the wedding. We cannot have this tension hanging over us on our special day. Our special day. The wedding that was supposed to mark the beginning of our life together now felt like a sham. How could I stand before our friends and family pledging my trust and faith to a woman who had conspired against me? How could I celebrate with a mother and best friend who had betrayed me so fundamentally? I stood up my decision, crystallizing with perfect clarity. There is not going to be a wedding, I said quietly. Sophia's eyes widened. You do not mean that. You are just upset right now. I have never been more certain of anything, I replied. I cannot marry someone who thinks my feelings are an overreaction, someone who conspires with others to decide what truths I am entitled to know. Gunnar, do not be dramatic, my mother said, her tone suddenly sharp. You are going to throw away your relationship because I found happiness. That is incredibly selfish. Her accusation of selfishness was the final straw. After decades of putting her first, of considering her feelings in every major life decision, to be called selfish for expecting basic honesty was beyond what I could bear. I am not throwing away anything, I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. You 3 already did that when you decided that your comfort was more important than the truth. I walked out of the restaurant alone, ignoring their calls behind me. For the first time since discovering their betrayal, I felt a strange sense of clarity. The path forward would be painful, but at least it would be one of my own choosing. I checked into a hotel that night, needing space away from Sophia and the apartment we shared. Sitting alone in that sterile room, I felt an odd mix of devastation and relief. While my world had collapsed around me at least, the collapse was complete. There were no more secrets to discover, no more betrayals waiting to blindside me. Through the long, sleepless night, I reflected on the relationships that had defined my life. I had built my identity around being a devoted son, a loyal friend, a loving partner. Now all three roles had been stripped away, leaving me wondering who I was without them. By morning, I knew what I had to do. This was not a situation that could be fixed with apologies or time. The breach of trust was too fundamental, the wound too deep. I needed to reclaim control over my life, to rebuild on my own terms. I started with practical steps. First, I called the wedding venue and explained that the event would not be taking place. The sympathetic coordinator, sensing something in my voice, waived the cancellation fee. I systematically worked through the vendor list, canceling each contract, arranging for the return of deposits where possible. With each call, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. Next came the hardest part. I crafted a brief, dignified email to our wedding guests, explaining that the wedding had been canceled. I provided no details, no drama, simply stating that Sophia and I had made the difficult decision to part ways. I apologized for any inconvenience and thanked them for their understanding. I sent it without consulting Sophia. This was my decision, and I would own it completely. While Sophia was at work the following day, I returned to our apartment with a friend from the architecture firm who had no connections to my mother or Jackson. We packed my essential belongings in 3 hours, leaving behind anything that seemed jointly owned or gifted by my mother. I left my key on the counter with a note asking her to respect my decision and not contact me. I arranged for the rest of my belongings to be placed in storage until I could decide on my next steps. I changed my personal phone number, created a new email address, and deactivated my social media accounts. I was not just breaking up with Sophia. I was severing ties with the life I had known. The only people who received my new contact information were a few colleagues and distant friends who had no connection to the 3 people I was leaving behind. The professional consequences of my decision were significant but manageable. I had accumulated enough goodwill at my firm that when I requested an extended leave of absence, citing personal issues, my supervisor was understanding. Better yet, he mentioned a potential project in Chicago that would benefit from my expertise, offering me not just an escape, but a genuine opportunity. "Take a month," he said. "The Chicago project will not break ground until then anyway. A change of scenery might do you good." Colleagues who had worked with me for years but had never met Sophia expressed concern but respected my privacy. Their support, freely given without judgment or expectation, reminded me that not all relationships were conditional or deceptive. I accepted the Chicago project, grateful for the chance to rebuild my professional identity in a new environment. Architecture had always been my anchor, the one area of my life where hard work and integrity yielded predictable results. Now it would become my salvation as well. Of course, the 3 of them did not accept my silence easily. Sophia progressed from angry voicemails on my old number to tearful emails begging for a conversation. "You cannot just disappear like this," she wrote. "We need to talk this through. I love you. This is not like you." But it was like me, I realized. The real me, not the version of myself who had been molded by her expectations and my mother's influence. The real me had principles that could not be compromised even for love. My mother's messages were more manipulative. "After everything I have sacrificed for you," one text read, "this is how you repay me. By disappearing without a word, I have spent my life putting you first, and now you are punishing me for finding happiness." Her attempts to make me feel guilty might have worked once, but now I saw them for what they were: emotional manipulation designed to prioritize her needs over mine yet again. The woman who had raised me to value honesty was now condemning me for my reaction to her dishonesty. Jackson's attempts to reach me were perhaps the most pathetic. "Bro, we have been friends for 25 years, he wrote in one email that slipped through my filters. "Are you really going to throw that away? It is not like I went after your girlfriend. Your mom is a grown woman who made her own choice." His justification ignored the years of trust he had violated, the sanctity of our friendship that he had disregarded. Of the three, his betrayal cut perhaps the deepest, because it came from someone who had walked beside me through my darkest times. I maintained complete silence toward all three, not out of spite or revenge, but because I knew there was nothing left to say. No explanation would undo their actions. No apology would restore my trust. The only path forward was one that did not include them. As weeks passed in Chicago, I began to heal. The city's architectural wonders provided both professional inspiration and personal distraction. I found a small but comfortable apartment with a view of Lake Michigan, waking each morning to the sight of sunrise over water, a daily reminder that beauty persists even after profound loss. I found a therapist, a no-nonsense woman who did not try to push me toward forgiveness I was not ready for. Instead, she helped me process the trauma of multiple betrayals and build healthier boundaries for future relationships. "Trust is earned," she told me in one particularly insightful session. "You gave it freely before, and that speaks well of your character. But now you have learned that trust must be matched with discernment. That is not cynicism. That is wisdom." I began to build a new social circle carefully and deliberately. There was Marco, an Italian architect on the project team who invited me for authentic, home-cooked meals. Sarah, a bookstore owner, who recommended novels that reflected my journey without knowing its details. Kyle, a fellow transplant to Chicago, who showed me the city's hidden gems. These new friendships were different, refreshingly straightforward, without the weight of history or expectation. I was careful not to define myself by what I had lost, sharing only that I had recently left a relationship and was starting fresh. The less I dwelled on the past, the more space I created for new possibilities. 6 months into my Chicago life, I began dating again. Casually at first, coffee meetings and museum visits that carried no pressure or promises. I was transparent about my cautiousness, my need to proceed slowly. The women who respected these boundaries were precisely the ones worth knowing better. Time and distance provided perspective. I came to understand that the betrayal I had experienced was not a reflection of my worth, but of the character flaws in those I had trusted. My mother and Jackson had made choices that prioritized their desires over integrity. Sophia had chosen loyalty to them over loyalty to me. None of that diminished who I was or what I deserved. The most profound lesson came unexpectedly nearly a year after I left Boston. I was working late one night when I received an email from my mother, somehow sent to my work address, that had remained unchanged. It contained no manipulations or justifications, just a simple acknowledgement: "I miss my son. I was wrong. I am sorry." I read it several times, searching for the emotional strings that had always been attached to her communications. Finding none, I still did not respond. Not out of hardness of heart, but because I had finally learned that some betrayals cannot be repaired with words alone. Some bridges once burned leave only ashes. Instead of dwelling on what could not be restored, I focused on building something new. I accepted a permanent position with the Chicago firm. I developed a reputation for innovative designs that incorporated natural light, perhaps a subconscious response to the years I had spent in emotional darkness. I found that family could be chosen, not just inherited. The friends who had stood by me became my brothers and sisters in all the ways that mattered. Holiday dinners in their homes felt more authentic than the performance those Sunday gatherings had become. Trust, I discovered, was not an all-or-nothing proposition. It could be extended in degrees, tested over time, withdrawn when necessary. This measured approach to relationships did not make me cynical. It made me wiser. I learned to listen not just to what people said, but to what their actions revealed about their character. The pain did not disappear completely. It simply transformed. What had once been a sharp, stabbing anguish became a dull reminder, like an old injury that aches before rain. In those moments, I reminded myself that the capacity to feel such hurt also meant the capacity to experience profound joy and connection. I would not trade my ability to feel deeply, even if it meant occasional pain. 2 years after leaving Boston, I barely recognized the man I had been. Not because I had fundamentally changed, but because I had finally become fully myself, untethered from the expectations and manipulations of others. My work was thriving, my friendships were genuine, and I had begun a relationship with a woman who understood that honesty was my non-negotiable requirement. The lesson I carry forward is this: loyalty is not blind devotion. It is a commitment to truth, even when that truth is uncomfortable. Real love does not ask you to compromise your principles or silence your pain. It embraces authenticity, even when that authenticity is messy or difficult. I do not know if I will ever reconnect with my mother Jackson or Sophia. That possibility remains an open question, one I no longer feel pressured to answer. What I do know is that I am no longer defined by their betrayal or by my loss. I am defined by how I rebuilt, by the life I created from the ashes of what was destroyed. If you have ever experienced betrayal by those you trusted most, I hope my story reminds you that rebuilding is possible. Your worth is not determined by how others treat you, but by how you choose to move forward. Have you ever had to completely rebuild your life after betrayal? Let me know in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more journeys of healing and self-discovery. And remember to share with someone who might need to hear that it is okay to walk away from people who betray your trust, no matter who they are. Thank you for listening, and I wish you the courage to always honor your own truth, whatever that may be.